Well, this is different. Corrundum is a mod for Space Age by AnotherZach, which adds a new planet on the far side of Vulcanus, and describes itself as a planet centered completely around a unique crafting tree for sulfur. And sure enough, crashing down, we immediately come across a giant patch of sulfur. And a pool of what I hope is petroleum gas. Breaking open the rocks gives us some basic ores and the new platinum ore. Once I collect my landing pad and cargo bays, we can start sending down basic supplies en masse. I need power, so the first thing I place down is my favorite solar grid. However, solar here is a mere 20% what it is on Novice, so this is not going to last for long. However, unlike Fulgora, the solar panels here are vulnerable to lightning, so I start crafting up a bunch of lightning rods immediately. However, I haven't been to Fulgora itself yet, so I don't have access to the larger ones. The technology tree tells me that progression is locked behind me actually mining some platinum ore, so I build a car and to go look for some. This place is really empty. After a few minutes of driving, I come across chalcopyrite. I don't know what this is used for, and it doesn't seem to be triggering anything, but I'm bound to need it sometime, so I stick up a small solar-powered mining setup and go on my way. I start driving, and then I kid you not, just a little bit west, I come across what I need. Boom, platinum. A single ore mine triggers the next technology, and one solar-powered mine later, and a car full of the ore, I head back to base. Platinum wants to be smelted like any other ore, but fortunately I've been to Vulcanus first, so I have foundries, because 50% productivity will never not be good. A look through the crafting recipes tells me that I've been given a Corrundum exclusive copy of the acid neutralization recipe from Vulcanus. However, I can't use this, despite being on a planet loaded with sulfur, because I don't have iron to turn it into sulfuric acid. Seems like we're going to need an awful lot of these catalytic chemical plants, which are like chemical plants but blue. Also, we can now craft Corrundum's electrochemical science pack, and it requires sulfuric acid, platinum plates, and sulfuric acid. The first step in the acid journey is turning sulfur into sulfur dioxide. And then we can turn sulfur and petroleum gas into hydrogen sulfide. However, this is when I notice that the catalytic chemical plants have 3 inputs, which is totally not a sign of things to come. That triggers the next technology, which gives us the recipe for water and sulfuric acid itself. Seems like I'm going to need a lot of this yellow stuff, so I double it. Okay, so here's the 3 inputs rearing this ugly head. I can't just use my regular blueprint for this, so after some finagling I come up with this plate of spaghetti. So we've now got water, but now this recipe happens to output raw sulfur. So the answer to this is the good old input priority splitter. Acid recipe wants dioxide and water, so after some more pipe spaghetti, we've got that online. Finally, I'm at a point where I can start building the electrochemical science pack, and a bit more acid to build it with. This planet is needing a lot of pipes, which I am now out of. So while I send the space platform back to Novice for a fresh shipment, I start building a rail line out to the platinum mine. These big mining drills are probably overkill, but I can't help myself to not use them. Also, it's probably not needed here, but I can't help but put in my own PTN train system, because why not? A few foundries later, and I've got automatic platinum feeding into automatic electrochemical science. So now we have automatic science and all that, but now comes the hard part, getting it off the planet. Because Corrundum doesn't have iron or copper, at least not normally. We can only get the raw ores by filtering them out of sulfate extraction, which we get from processing chalcopyrite. Further, to get copper ore, I have to get copper sulfate extraction, which requires me to actually research something with electrochemical science, which means I need to get a rocket here. Fortunately, I thought of this beforehand, so I chucked down a rocket silo, and a few minutes later, we have a rocket. While the platform heads back, I set up the chemical plants for processing chalcopyrite. The recipe's a lot slower than I expected. Back on Novice, the science has arrived and the labs are cooking. The first step in the iron chain is to combine iron plates with sulfate extract to get copper ore, which I have to say is a very strange recipe. A few iron plates to get us started, and now we have iron sulfate extract, which then gets combined with some more iron plates to give us iron ore and sulfuric acid dilute. Okay, here's another reason why I'm glad I went to Vulcanus first. The iron ore we're generating here has to be turned back into plates to make a positive feedback loop. I could just smelt it in ordinary furnaces, but Corrundum also has patches of calcite, meaning I can just make the iron ore in the foundry instead and cast that into iron plates, both of which gives me the innate 50% productivity. It takes a little bit to get going, but I soon have a small steady stream of iron coming out. And then I do the same thing with copper. However, both of these reduction recipes are spitting out sulfuric acid dilute, so I've got to turn that back into sulfuric acid. However, this recipe takes longer than I thought, so the math tells me that I'm going to need a lot of chemical plants. Like, a lot. The copper foundries can just be like the iron ones with a changed recipe, and now, finally, we have a steady supply of both primary resources on Corrundum. The final step here is to do forced reduction of copper, which also spits out an awful lot of acid dilute, so we'll need to double the already ridiculous amount of dilution plants that we have. And then, just for the heck of it, I also doubled the copper and iron foundries. This place is finally starting to look like a real base, so I placed down the good old green chip assembly. And then red chips. However, red chips require something I haven't mentioned so far: plastic. The only way to make that here is by using this mess of a recipe, which calls for solid fuel, acid, sulfur dioxide, and light oil. And this is where I find out why the catalytic chemical plants has 3 inputs. I mean, look at this. My solution to this spaghetti is this, which is ugly, but it works, so it's fine. I couldn't be bothered to figure out the math for this, so I give it an even dozen plants. Nope, just kidding, double that. However, of these 3 ingredients, we don't have light oil, which we have to synthesize through acid and petrol gas. So I make some chemical plants for those too. The plastic I then begin to feed into the foundries to combine with molten iron and copper to make LDS, which we'll need for the rocket. Okay, so it was at this point during my playthrough that the mod was updated to remove the plate input from the reduction recipes, which kind of invalidates this whole infinite loop that I got set up, but I couldn't be bothered to remove all these belts, so I'm just going to leave it here for them to do nothing. But I guess that's what I get for playing a mod which is still in active development. However, one thing that hasn't changed is that acid is still the main bottleneck in everything, so I go around the factory trying to increase production of all the various liquids. Red chip production is starting to back up, so I get loot chips online, which is step 2 of 3 for the rocket. And then I slap down half of a Neilhouse blueprint that I've been using since point 18. And with that, we have a rocket, and finally a way for me off this planet after who knows how long. The planet might be done, but the science is not. Corrundum has an interesting suite of infinite technologies. We have a bunch of productivity recipes for pipes, turbines, Corrundum rocket fuel, and most significantly, sulfuric acid. We can also get 3 new recipes for making nutrients on Novice, a steam recipe for space platforms, which I'm not sure how useful it'll be, an improved thruster, and most noticeably an icebox to keep your spoilables at 50% freshness, which, as a Gleba level, I'm not sure how I feel about this, but we'll see. Also, we can unlock a pressure laboratory, which is like the normal labs, but only takes uncommon and above qualities of science packs. I've never really sunk my teeth into quality as much as I probably should have, but maybe this could be a viable alternative to the Gleba Biolabs. In case you're wondering, if you place normal science packs in these, they simply disappear. So, Corrundum. I enjoyed this planet. If there's one thing I've always enjoyed with content mods, it's production loops, even if the solution is usually just a priority input splitter. I also really liked the concept of diluting iron and copper out of the chalcopyrite, even if this was simplified in the middle of my playthrough. Maybe there could be a middle ground between what it was then and what it is now, because I do think the complexity here was good. If anything, I want more of these production loops, maybe with the 2 sulfur assets. I don't know. If I were to have one piece of feedback, it would be about Corrundum's current place in the system. Currently, it's unlocked with white science alongside the original 3 planets. I would say that maybe it would be more suitable to have Corrundum require Vulcanus science to ensure the player doesn't go there immediately after getting off Novice, because currently, given the vast amount of chemical plants, and not to mention pipes that you need on Corrundum, without a way of getting the iron and copper to build those things until after you get science off the planet, you cannot survive there initially without getting a lot of imports. But that's just my 5 cents. Space Age modded plants are a great way of having multiple self-contained mini overhaul mods all within the same playthrough, and Corrundum is a great example of that. This may be my first modded planet in this playthrough, but it's not the last. I'll be going to 4 more of these in this run, but not to mention the original 3, so stay tuned for all those. Also, I'm working on a new version of the PTN system, so an update video will be coming out for that eventually. Until then, this has been Jorvin, and thanks for watching.